Well, with more on the housing policies and this campaign, we're now joined by Halifax Mayor Andy Fillmore, London Mayor Josh Morgan, and Saskatoon Mayor Cynthia Block. Hello to the three of you.
Nice to be with you today.
Listen, I'm going to start out here with a fairly general question, because we know that housing is a huge challenge right across the country. But when you think about your own situation, and given that we're now talking to a national audience, what has been the impact of this housing crunch on your city? Andy, I'll get you to start us out.
Yeah, sure. Of course, affordability is the top of the agenda here. The house prices, because of interest rates and supply chain and labor rates, have really gone through the roof, making particularly first-time home ownership out of the reach for many. But of course, it impacts the whole housing continuum. When there's not a house for people to move out of their apartment into a house, that means that apartment's not available for people to move from their parents' house and into an apartment. So it slows down the whole housing continuum, and we have a lot of work ahead to do to speed up the approvals processes and to find ways to make homes more affordable.
Cynthia, what would you say to that same question?
We're seeing things in our city that we have never seen before. The overdose crisis is new to our city, and it's wrapped up in a homelessness crisis, that's wrapped up in a housing crisis, it's wrapped up in an affordability crisis. And so we know that there's great work being done, and I want to give a shout out to everyone who's on the front lines of this right now, but we urgently need to get more housing up as quickly as possible.
Josh Morgan, what would you say to it?
Yeah, it's been a big issue for my city as well, and I would echo what the other mayors have said. Affordability is really the key piece here. We're trying to do what we can on supply, but also create the type of units that have some level of affordability to them, which is really challenging to do given the current economic environment. I know my council and my city has really ramped up our permissions that we've given for housing across the city. But when you see the economic headwinds and the current situation in the United States and how that has slowed down some investment, it's really challenging to try to catch up and meet up with the demand that we have in our city when all the permissions and all the conditions can be right, but the nervousness about what comes next is can be a drag on this sort of thing.
Yeah, and of course, what's happening south of the border has had such an impact on this election campaign. Although, I will say beyond Trump, probably the more common promises that we're hearing, or at least issue addressed, has to do with housing. And we've heard, different proposals from different parties. For example, Conservatives promising to reward municipalities that cut development charges, Liberals promising to get back into the building of homes, the NDP promising to build public housing on public lands. And, that's just a sampling from each party. So I wonder, from your perspective of what you've heard so far in this campaign, has any promise or pledge been encouraging at all? Andy?
Yeah, the help with development permits is a big one. Of course, that's one of the main drivers of home cost. We have to be really careful about this, though, and be really clear with the respective leaders as we head into the election that any dismissal of our ability to earn development charges really needs to be replaced immediately. We're not able to build neighborhoods and provide the housing we need to address this crisis if we can't afford to build those things. And that really is a municipal responsibility to build those things. So that's a really important one. Anything that we can do to reduce red tape, to eliminate barriers to approvals, while still maintaining the public trust and things like the environment and social equity, are going to be extremely important.
Cynthia, what would you say to it?
Yeah, I would echo what Mayor Fillmore said, that we are not able as municipalities to keep up with the things that cities do given the current property tax. And if we have to do more, I don't know how we pay for that. As an example, a fire engine in 2020 cost $800,000, and today it costs $2 million. We just don't have room to be able to afford those kinds of things. So I would just say that, whomever forms the next federal government, if they have ideas of how they can create programs that helps to accelerate that housing need, then they should pay for it. They should help us be able to get that housing up as quickly as possible.
Josh Morgan?
Yeah, I think municipalities have always been partners with the federal government in their goals to create more housing across this country. And so we've been full participants in programs like the Housing Accelerator Fund and other things that have come along, trying to produce the units that we've made commitments to. And in my city, we've exceeded our first year targets in those units. I think the proposals that are on the table by different parties to cut GST, remove federal costs from the housing envelope, though, those are good proposals. I think when you get into the ones that are partnerships with municipalities, what we need to see is fully funded proposals from the parties. So if you're going to ask municipalities to be partners at the table, you have to recognize that we've got basically three sources of revenue: property tax, user fees, and government grants. And if you're going to ask us to participate, we're going to need the requisite funding to be able to do that, because we've got tons of other things that we're responsible to do as municipalities, like the other mayors have said.
Well, there is already a debate around the housing accelerator that was introduced a couple of years ago, whether or not that should continue, should be doubled. What would you say to that, Josh Morgan?
Well, I can only say how we've used it, and I think there was flexibility in this program, so I can't comment on how anyone else has, but we've used it to try to be innovative, and we've actually produced and exceeded the number of units that we were asked to produce. We've created an office residential conversion program, taken over 100,000 square feet of vacant office space out of our downtown and converted that to residential. There's lots more proposals coming. We've created incentives along transit corridors. We've done tons of stuff to try to actually drive units, and we've been successful in doing that. And whether it's this program or another version of a federal program, we're gonna partner on those programs as long as they have, the proper funding in place and they've got results that we can commit to achieving. And like I said, municipalities have always been on the ground and really effective at helping federal governments meet their needs. That's got to be done in partnership and conversation so that we can be frank and transparent about what we need to get things done in partnership.
Is there enough conversations taking place in partnership at all? And Andy, I'll get you to start out on that one.
I believe so. Yeah. I mean, I would say on the Housing Accelerator Fund, of course, that's in our rear view now. And I think the main benefit of that will be the ability, basically the elimination of R1 zoning, so that people can build that in-law suite or that basement flat to help them afford the house, a young family afford the house with the income from a rental suite, or to help a retiree or a widow or a widower to stay in the house they've always been in by letting an apartment within. But the work I think that lies ahead is on new construction and the best to fill the other segments of the housing continuum. And some of the work that I think lies ahead with whoever the housing minister will be within whichever government will be, is how to bring some financial weight to the pro formas that builders are working with to make the units affordable. We're sitting on incredibly high land costs now. We've already talked about the high cost of labor, the high cost of materials. We're sitting in Nova Scotia at about $211 a square foot, $311 a square foot now for a new house, a 2,000 square foot home. That's $600,000. It's we need help to make homes affordable, and those are the conversations that are ahead.
Mm-hmm. Cynthia Block, Cynthia, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, we need help on all sides, and the city is certainly doing its part with a lot of incentives. The one piece, that is, perhaps somewhat unique to our city is that 80% of the people that are unhoused in our city are Indigenous. And so the city of Saskatoon has focused all of its half dollars on affordable housing. And that's going to be, extremely important, that not only do we get people into that housing, but the piece that I think is really going to be helpful is that many of the providers of that housing are also Indigenous. So I think we have some very good progress to be made in the future. What I worry about right now are the gaps between, an ability to get that housing up and running and the folks that are waiting to be housed. That we need a plan as quickly as possible. Office conversions, all of the rest of it, it's all on the table. But we need something to happen very quickly to avoid some of the other unintended consequences that happen when we don't make sure all people are safely housed.
So we have 3 weeks left in this campaign then. What would you like to hear from the individual parties before this campaign is done to perhaps give you some hope that housing is going to be addressed in a meaningful way in the cities across this country? Josh, if you could start us off.
Well, I'm really glad that housing is one of the top issues being discussed, because it's certainly on the ground a huge issue in my city. Between that and what's happening in the United States, that consumes the conversation right now. People are looking for places to live and places they can afford. What I'd like to see from the rest of this campaign is not only the federal government and the parties, the parties running for federal government continue to commit to housing policies, but ensure that they know that they've got to sit down with municipalities after that's done and discuss with us how we can actually do this. We can't just help build a bunch of homes. We need to be able to ensure that we can afford to build the water and the wastewater, the sewers, provide the fire and police protection to those homes in the future. So in fast-growing cities where we're growing a lot of homes, we need to look at the larger suite of services that municipalities need to offer and balance those out in partnership with the federal government to ensure we're achieving goals for our common constituents. So I would look to continue this being a top of mind discussion, but a commitment to sitting down with municipal representatives and saying, all right, how do we get this done now on the ground? You guys know best. You do this each and every day, and you can really give us some guidance, and we're willing to do that.
Mm-hmm. Andy, what are you hoping to hear with what's left in this campaign?
Yeah, two things, if I can get them in briefly. The first is, not to be crass, but show us the money. So we know that the two senior orders of government earn a disproportionate share of the benefit of the growth in our population and our communities, while the municipal order of government bears a disproportionate share of the cost of growth through infrastructure and fire halls and garbage collection and all those things. So we really do need a different fiscal framework. I know that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is very focused on this, a national prosperity framework, and I wholeheartedly support that. So we need to have a different financial arrangement with the senior orders of government. And the second thing, if I could, is and I appreciate Mayor Block raising affordable housing. If we spend $1 on building new affordable housing, it goes about a third as far if we spend that same dollar on converting existing housing stock. So you get about 3 times the housing if you apply the federal affordable housing dollars to existing stock. So, for example, the half payments, I'm all for the half payments and making agreements with the federal government. But if we're able to use those half funds to instead use them as rent supplements or other municipal tax breaks that we could offer builders and tenants on an ongoing basis, we need to be really flexible and innovative in our thinking here. And I really do want, I'll be looking for the parties to show us how they can help us unlock the potential of existing housing stock to meet the affordable housing need, because those buildings are already built and cost about a third as much as new builds.
Okay, Mayor Block, last word to you.
Yeah, the property tax is an unsustainable tool going forward to be the primary way that we fund cities based on the costs. And so anything that can be done to alleviate that and create a new fiscal framework, I would be looking for. The other thing, and that was the word I was going to use, and Mayor Fillmore just said it, flexibility. One of the things that I really appreciated about the Housing Accelerator Fund is that it allowed cities to be able to direct those funds where they needed it the most. And our city decided affordable housing was the most important place to put that money right now. Even though we have challenges on all parts of that continuum, we are using other tools civically to be able to do that. So I think that having that flexibility allows us to get done what we need to do in our cities. And by a comparison, the encampment funding that we received late last year was very restrictive, and that made it harder for us to address the homelessness crisis, in the speed with which we require it at this time.
Interesting conversation. Of course, only have the chance to scratch surface, but thank you. I appreciate the time today. Mayors Andy Fillmore, Josh Morgan, Cynthia Block, thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.